Sziasztok! Én András vagyok, ez itt a Túranapló. Ez az adás két okból is különleges. Egyrészt ez az első évad utolsó adása, legközelebb nyáron találkozunk majd. Másrészt pedig ez az adás angolul lesz, ugyanis egy angol túrázóval, Ashley G Deannel beszélgettem, aki közel 9000 kilométeren keresztül gyalogolta végig az E4-es túraútvonalat, amelynek az országos kék túra is része. Nagyon köszönöm mindenkinek, aki részese volt az első évadnak, akár mint beszélgető partner, akár mint hallgató. Nagyon érdekel, hogy mit gondoltok a podcastról, és hogy mit szeretnétek a következő évadban hallani. Írjatok üzenetet Facebookon vagy Instagramon, ahol 1,5 millió néven találtok meg, vagy küldjetek e-mailt a podcast@hiking.hu e-mail címre. Köszönöm a figyelmet, sziasztok! Hi everyone and welcome to the 9th episode of Túranapló, a Hungarian podcast about hiking and outdoor adventures. My name is András and I will be your host today. This is a special episode as it is in English. Today's guest is Ashley G, who walked the E4 trail, which spans approximately 9,000 kilometers from Spain to Cyprus through the Pyrenees, the Alps and the Balkans.
Hi, my name's Ashley Dean. I spent 18 months walking across Europe and did about 8,000 kilometers.
Join us to discover why Ashley embarked on this journey, what his packing list was for the hike and what equipment he took with him to make videos about the trip, why he felt at home in the forests of Hungary, the story of an interesting encounter with two journalists, and how it felt to arrive in Cyprus at the end of the trail. I found Ashley through Instagram while browsing photos with hashtags related to the Blue Trail. The Blue Trail is a 1,200 kilometer long trail which winds from one end of Hungary to the other. Not many foreigners post about this trail, so I checked his profile. That's when I found out that he was not only walking the Blue Trail, but the whole E4 long distance trail, a 17-month hike over almost 9,000 kilometers.
My name is Ashley Dean. I'm English. I've done a bit of hiking mainly in the UK, but in 2017 and 2018 I loosely followed the E4 trail across Europe from the southern tip of Spain to Vienna, and then the next 4 months later from Vienna down to Cyprus, and walking the Blue Trail was like one part of that.
That was about 8.5 thousand kilometers.
Yeah.
So my immediate question is, why? Why did you do this?
Why not? I just had this fantasy of like living out of a backpack and just walking across the land for a long way. I hadn't travelled much anywhere really, so I just thought it'd be an interesting way of seeing Europe and seeing a lot of places that if you travel by train or car or you'd mostly miss a lot of these places, which is the big advantage to walking, I think.
And how did this fit into your work or private life? Because you were away for 8 months, both years. So how did you manage to arrange that?
I quit my job both times. The first time I quit completely, and they were happy to take me back when I got back home. So I went back for 4 months, saved money again, and then left again.
Since my longest hike so far had only been 5 days long, and even then I slept in guest houses and not in a tent, I was intrigued about how one prepares for such a long trip, what to bring, and how to deal with the logistics of it. How much did you plan ahead? Did you plan out where you're going to sleep and whether you're going to stay in your tent or in a guest house, or how did that happen?
The only thing I planned in advance was like the route, so I had all my maps and stuff bought in advance. But in terms of sleeping, I very much just didn't really plan any more than a week ahead. I would normally look how far I could get in a week, and if it was like a town or city along the way, that's where I would plan to have a day off. In terms of sleeping, it would just be when I got up in the morning, I would look at how much ground I could cover. But I'm very much not really a planner. I just kind of hope for the best. You know?
You mentioned that you followed the E4 trail loosely. What does it mean that you followed it loosely?
I mainly followed it from the start in Spain to Grenoble in France, and then took my own route through the Swiss Alps instead of. I think the official route goes up towards Lake Geneva and then the Jura Mountains in Switzerland, and kind of misses the Alps completely. But I wanted to like explore the Alps properly.
A thing about the Blue Trail is that you're supposed to walk the Blue Trail exactly all the time, no deviations ever. So to me, it seemed a bit strange because I was kind of trained with this idea in mind that I must follow the trail always. How did it feel to you that you were not always exactly on that specific trail?
It was a bit strange because it's like you can't say you've done the E4 when you take alternate routes. But it was I made those decisions because I wanted to go to the places that were off the trail. It was okay for me, like psychologically.
What was the biggest challenge, really? Like, I can see so many things that might have been hard, but what was the hardest in this whole journey?
I think when things got difficult and you need to, like, part of you wants to kind of like just go home, but I think the hardest part is a kind of mental thing of kind of keeping in mind why you were doing it and why you wanted to do it in the first place, and to kind of keep going when things are difficult.
You faced a lot of issues through this hike. Maybe it's just that you highlighted these in the videos more than the beauty sometimes. But you listed problems with blisters, with broken tent poles, with not being able to cross in Spain due to ticks and whatever.
Yeah.
How did these hurdles feel at the time?
At the time, like, very frustrating. You mentioned the incident in Spain with the ticks, and that was like the same day I tried to cross a river, but the bridge had been swept away in a flood. Some locals told me where I could cross further down, but then the floods had blocked the gate with all like debris from the floods, so I couldn't open this gate to get through. So then I had to backtrack even more and take a road around, and that was a very frustrating day because everything went wrong. But then I unexpectedly came across a hut to sleep in that it wasn't even on my map, and there was like water in there to drink. And so I find that sometimes if everything goes wrong, you can be like really frustrated, but then everything will just turn around and become good, like in an instant. So it's kind of important not to get too despondent, too frustrated.
You talked a lot about your shoes. You didn't wear like this big hiking boots like the B or maybe even C type shoes, but these were all A type shoes.
Yeah.
How did you decide for that?
That was just past experience. My first long distance, long walk, I wore boots and my feet were in absolute agony. The boots were just too heavy. So then my next walk, I bought some like trail shoes, and they were perfect. I had no problems, so I've just kept wearing them since. I think there's a trade off because obviously you haven't got as much protection around your feet, so you can hurt yourself. It's a higher risk of injury, but I kind of find the comfort to be worth the trade off.
I saw in your Austrian segment that you hiked some pretty snowy parts as well, without gaiters, in very low shoes. How did that work out?
My feet are very cold and wet. Yeah, I've never worn gaiters. I don't even own gaiters, so I just had to kind of plough through. One of the advantages of shoes is because they're so small and light, they dry quite quickly. But yeah, that wasn't a very happy day.
So shoes are probably the most important things, maybe next to backpacks. But how did you come up with the whole packing list?
I just stuck to the basics. I don't think I carried a lot of cheap gear because I didn't start out with a whole lot of money. So things like my sleeping bag, I spent money on the shoes and the tent and my sleeping mat, but the rest of it was just I needed a stove, so I bought a stove. I didn't really put a lot of thought into it. I'm sure But a lot of the stuff I had was far too heavy.
And what did you change in your gear for the second year?
I think I carried most of the same stuff. I just approached it like I know this stuff works. It might not be the best, but I won't have any surprises with it.
So it was very interesting to see that there was only a very short segment where you had company. You had one friend join you.
Yeah.
How did that feel? How was that different?
It's quite a big it's quite a big adaptation, because obviously when Ian came out to join me, I think I'd been 4 or 5 months. I think I'd been walking to Chamonix, so I was kind of very much like set in what I was doing, how I got up in the morning and what have you. And then when Ian came along, he obviously had kind of his way of doing things, so it was like just kind of getting up in the morning. Ian is very much like a morning person, whereas I'm just like I wake up slowly and get up when I want to get up. So it's kind of finding that compromise. And then obviously when I was back on my own again, I would have to kind of readjust then to, being on my own, having to make all the decisions myself, and not having any like backup or anything if things get dangerous.
Yeah, if I were going on such a long trip, the two things I would probably be mostly worried about, of course, there's a chance of injury and whatever, but loneliness and boredom. Did you face these two? And if so, how did you cope with them?
Not so much. I think I've always been like a bit of a loner and not very good like with people. So like the whole being on my own thing was okay. I never really felt alone. The boredom sometimes, but I think I had like the film, so my thought I had like each day I had that problem of what I was going to film, and I had that to think about. And I also kind of read a lot, which I really kind of miss in real life, because and that was like a really good way of passing the time.
And two more things about this whole, like the logistics. For me, it's always a bit of a tricky question to decide how much food and water to carry. How much did you, and how many times did you miscalculate?
I don't think I ever miscalculated. I had like maximum 2 litres of water. And then if I was going to somewhere where I wouldn't be able to fill up each day, then I would like buy a plastic bottle for extra water. Like Hungary, for instance, has like a water tap in each village. And food, I would just buy food every 3 or 4 days. I'd always be passing through a village.
So how much did your backpack weigh in the morning?
Maybe around 20 kilograms, something like that, with a full food bag. But it's one of them, I think you get used to the weight, and then you can never move very, very fast in it. But I think after the first 2 weeks, that's when the kind of pain and like you have like sores on your shoulders and stuff. After the first 2 weeks, it becomes a lot easier, I think.
Did you notice a lot of changes on your body regarding muscles and stuff like that?
Not visually. I felt a lot stronger and faster. And then when I got home, like a lot of people were saying how kind of skinnier I was and stuff, but I didn't really notice that myself.
And what was your policy regarding shaving and haircuts? Because sometimes you let it grow out very long, sometimes you didn't. How did that happen?
On the first walk, I was shaving up until somewhere in France, and then I just thought, why am I shaving every week? So I just chucked the razor and the shaving foam away to kind of save some weight. And then on the second walk, I didn't shave at all. So by the end of it, I had a 9-month-old beard and hair.
How much did this whole thing cost?
I'm not sure what it is in euros, but the Eastern Europe thing I cost about £4,000 for the 9 months. But I was in accommodation quite a bit more on that trip. I don't know about the Western Europe one. I didn't really record it very well.
Ashley made movies about his hikes, an episode for each country he visited. This obviously requires a lot of extra effort and equipment during the hike, neither of which are cheap when you have to cover a lot of ground every day and have to carry everything on your back. So you are making this series of videos of your trip, which is on YouTube. I imagine this requires some extra preparation, starting with the gear. What sort of gear did you take with yourself for shooting video?
Just a camera and like a microphone. That was all I had, and a little like a tripod, but it kind of bends so I could wrap it around like railings and trees and stuff. Data storage was just, I had like a ton of memory cards, SD cards, and I always had to buy more because no matter how many I thought I would use, I always ended up using like more. So I must have spent a fortune on SD cards along the way. And then charging, I just had extra batteries, and I usually stayed in a room every like 3-4 days, so we charged everything then.
Mentioning that you bought SD cards or that you kept buying SD cards, does that mean that you didn't really have a backup of your movies before you arrived home?
No, not really. I started out with like a USB card, and I think the first month I kind of backed everything up when I got to a computer, but that would just take too long, and I wanted to be out and about, so I just kind of put the SD cards in like a waterproof bag in the bottom of my backpack and just hope for the best. And only once one of my cards failed after a week into using it, and it wouldn't work at all in the camera, but then when I got back, like miraculously it was working. I was able to get the footage off it, but everything was fine. It worked out.
And how much planning did you do up front for the videos? Like, did you figure out, okay, I'm gonna take a shot from here, or did you just wing it?
A bit of both. I've been like making films like since my teens. I studied at college and university, so I kind of as I went along, I was kind of looking out because I knew what kind of shots I'd have to get, what dialogue I would have to say to the camera to kind of construct a story. And before I left, I think I actually wrote down ideas for each episode, but then when I was actually on the road, I just forgot all about that and just kind of just responded to whatever was happening.
Do you know how much raw material you have in total?
It's like 600 gigabytes of raw footage for both years. That's quite a bit.
You get home with 300 gigabytes of video. How do you start? Where do you start?
I had to put it on the computer first, and then I would go through and look at each video, and I'd usually write down in the editing software like what country it was from, what happens in the shot. I would just try and assemble each episode very roughly and just try and create like the narrative. Very like time consuming to do.
You had lots of shots in your film or films when you walk past the camera, which means that you had to walk ahead, put your camera down, walk back, and then walk there again. How did that make you feel?
Exhausted. It's ridiculous. You add so much more distance onto the journey just to kind of make a video out of it. There's a shot in, I think it's the Spain video, where the camera's quite high up and there's like a slow zoom out, and I'm kind of walking along the bottom of the screen, and I think the raw footage on that shot was about 25-30 minutes long, and I walked so far away from the camera that when I got back up to the hill where the camera was, it took me like 5 minutes to remember where I'd put it. I was kind of, because when you walk away from the camera, you don't know if it's still there, if someone else has come along and taken it, or the wind's blowing it off a rock. So I was getting really paranoid that it had been blowing off the side of the mountain. But the shot looks good in the film.
If you had no financial constraints, what sort of equipment would you take on your next trip?
I think number one would be a drone. probably a better camera with changeable lenses and like tripods and stuff. It's the weight problem as well. Obviously, the more stuff you carry, you got to carry it in your backpack.
What plans do you have next, apart from still editing the however many hours of footage that you still have to?
I think this year is mainly just finishing the videos I've got, and I'm saving up again, and then I haven't decided what to do next. There's just so many things, so many options out there, so many trails.
Are you maybe considering writing a book or something? I don't know. It's just...
No, I wouldn't write. I get asked that a lot. No, I think the videos, even the videos, it's hard to express it, if that makes sense, because so much of it is like the mind and the body. It's very kind of like internal, I think. But I think once I've finished the videos, I'll kind of move on to something else. And I'd like to do something on a bike, I think, next. It might be easier.
As someone who's from Hungary and has walked the Blue Trail, I was especially interested in Ashley's experiences on this segment of the E4. I have a couple of more specific things I would like to discuss with you about the Blue Trail that you hiked. First of all, well, how was it?
It was very good. The tour I found was just very like chilled out. There was no big dramas or anything all like throughout the whole thing. But I think one of the things I loved most about it was the camping, just camped in the forest and not having to worry about like the authorities or anything. It's very special of Hungary to have legal wild camping. I felt that Hungary, like the Blue Trail, is similar in landscape to the UK, except from you have more trees than we do. I thought the Blue Trail was very relaxing. It's so much like forest, and I saw wildlife, like especially the deers. I saw so many herds of deer in the forests. You actually mentioned this, and I wrote it down because I really like this couple of sentences. Most of the time I followed the Blue Trail in forests, and although I always thought I would be bored after hiking through the Alps, I was the most relaxed I've been in months. Although the heat of the day was brutal, the shade of the forest was never far away. After more than a month on the trail, the climbs were easier. Life in the forest was relaxing. I felt at peace out on the trail. Humans have evolved to be outside, to be among trees and in nature, not work indoors in artificial light. It was a primal feeling. I was far from home, but felt at home. It's a special feeling, I think, when you feel like that. It's just very nice to kind of live in the mountains and the forests. I really like that you put it this way, because I love hiking in Hungary, and I've not done many hikes in really tall mountains. I've been to Georgia, near the Russian border. But I never knew whether I feel so much at home in the Hungarian forests because they are in Hungary or because it's just these forests. I think when you're in the high mountains like the Alps, you're in a very exposed environment. So you're always a lot more on edge, even though you're surrounded by great beauty. But in the forests, you're just surrounded by the wildlife. You feel a lot more like cocooned, surrounded by nature, than I think you do in the high mountains. Did you get the booklet to collect stamps for the Blue Trail? No, I didn't. No, I did stamp some stamps in my diary, but I didn't do it all the way along. I probably should have. We already discussed that there was a language barrier, but did you manage to interact with the locals in Hungary? Yeah, I did, mainly like the younger generation. I had one encounter I came off the trail in, is it Vac or Vach? VAC? Yeah, I came off the trail for a night there, and I booked into a hostel, I think maybe 2 hours or something before I got there. It was very kind of spur of the moment. And when I got there, the people who ran the hostel weren't there, but there was a family who lived in the hostel, who kind of gave me a room to sleep in, and their son had spent some time working over here in the UK, and he spoke very good English, and so he took me in and like let me eat with their family and talking about rock music, spend the evening talking about music, and that was very nice.
It was very interesting for me to see which segments were featured in the movie about Hungary and which were not. As I was watching, it was like, oh, okay, this is Irotkő, and bam, we're at Balaton. And then I remember that it took me like 7 days to get from A to B on that part. How did you make these choices? Yeah. What to include and what not?
I think first of all, it's like creating a story. So if I have something to say in a particular place, and it fits with things that happened before or will happen later in the film, then I'll choose to include that. Also, there are, especially in Hungary, there was, I think, maybe 10 or 15 minutes I cut out of the video just to kind of keep it short, because it was already, I think the final film was about 30 minutes. So I was very kind of worried of making it too long to watch. So there was some places and some scenes that were, although they were like very beautiful, just I had to cut it for time. And I knew that like Balaton, for instance, was one of my favourite places. I think that campsite on top of is it St George's Hill, I think it's called, was one of my favourite campsites on the whole trip, just with that view of Balaton.
There was a big storm when you were on top of the Matra mountains approaching Kékes.
Yeah. Did
you stay in your accommodation for that day? That was not entirely clear.
No, that was, I think there's a shot, I think where I point out Kékes, on top, and I'm on top of an observation tower, and that was about 2 hours, I think, before the storm rolled in. So I came down from the tower, and I got to my accommodation probably 10-15 minutes before the storm came in. So then I filmed the actual storm from a balcony. I remember my map with the accommodation on sent me to the wrong place. So I was like looking up at the sky, and I knew that the storm was coming in, and I was like, where's this place? So I was getting a little panicked, but I got there just in time.
At one point during his hike, Ashley ran into 2 journalists working for index.hu, the largest online newspaper in Hungary. They were shooting their own video series about the Blue Trail and took the opportunity to interview Ashley. I asked him about this experience.
That was very strange. I can't remember the name of the village, but it was a motel on the side of the road, and I couldn't be bothered to camp that night, so I just thought, I'll go and see if they have a room in this motel. And there was a guy sat by reception when I went in, and he obviously heard me speaking English. So then when I left reception, he was like, where are you from? What are you doing? So like I told him, and he was like, we're making a film. Can we interview you? So I was like, right, okay.
This is how that interview went.
Where are you from?
I'm from England.
And what are you doing here?
I'm hiking the Blue Trail from Kozeg to Romania. Well, have you heard of the E4 trail? Mm-hmm. I've been hiking the E4. So last year I walked from Spain to Vienna, and this year I'm Vienna down to Greece and Cyprus.
Okay.
And the Blue Trail is part of it.
Is a part of it.
Yeah. This is my 25th day. 25th
day from
Vienna.
From Vienna,
yeah.
Okay. And how long was the route from Spain to Vienna?
It was 8.5 months.
Ooh, nice. And how many kilograms of your bag?
I'm not sure. Give it a try. See what you think.
So it's very heavy.
Yeah, I'm used to it now.
Thank you very much. Have a nice journey.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
And you, thank you.
Thank you very much.
It was a very surreal encounter because I'd walked maybe 30 kilometers or something that day. So I was just thinking about a shower, and suddenly I was being interviewed on camera and having to come up with answers. But I didn't know who these guys were. I think somebody told me afterwards that it was they're like a very big like media company or something. But I didn't know that at the time.
that was me.
That was you, yeah, on private mess inbox, yeah.
Yes.
But at the time, I just thought they were a couple of guys off YouTube.
No, they are actual journalists.
Yeah.
Did you also actually meet a lot of hikers in Hungary?
I didn't actually meet as many as I expected. I didn't know if I was just in the wrong season. But I can't remember how many I met, but I know on one of my first days, I met a Hungarian guy coming the other way, and he'd walked. I think he'd ran most of it the previous year, and then he'd had to take some months off due to illness. So was just finishing the last like 2 or 3 days off when I met him. And that was quite a cool encounter to meet someone like right at the start of my trip along the Kektura. But I don't think I met many other people. And I didn't meet any like foreigners either on there. So I don't know if is it a popular trail outside of Hungary? Or, as an Englishman, I wouldn't have known about the Kektura if it wasn't part of the E4. Hungary itself was quite like a mystery to me. I didn't really know anything of Hungary other than just like Budapest.
Did you take a couple of days off to explore the city?
Yeah, I did. I think I was maybe 4 or 5 days in total. It was, I quite liked it. It's one of my favourite cities on the route, I think. It's quite like a mix of architecture and just quite a kind of laid back feel, I thought. And the view from it's actually in the film of watching the sunset above the Danube there, looking down at the like Chain Bridge in Parliament. It's quite a special place, I think.
Before you started your hike, well, not in, but into Hungary, you went home for 4 months.
Yeah.
How did that feel to be back from the trail in your quote unquote real life?
Very, very strange, because I came home, and I think a week or two after I got home, I was like back in the job I'd left, and it was just very. I think I still had my beard and my hair was long, and I still kind of in my heart I was still out on the trail, but I was kind of back, like working, and it's just very strange to be back under a roof permanently, and it's hard to explain. It's when you're out on the trail, you kind of miss having like running water and being able to switch the heating on and just sit and watch telly. But then when you get back home, you start to miss just being under canvas and even like the weight of the backpack and stuff. It's very strange how you become accustomed to things, and yeah, it took a while to kind of adjust.
But you didn't have much time because soon you left again. How was that when you were like going back on a trail, and how did it feel like being about to embark on this journey, and how did it feel to actually start it again?
It was good. It was less when I set out the first time. I was there was the most I'd walked was 10 days. So my first few weeks when I started in Spain, I was thinking, can I do this? How long will I last? But then when I set out the second time, I kind of knew, well, I did 9 months the last time, so I should be able to do it. So I was a lot more confident, I think, setting out the second time. It was just nice to kind of say goodbye to work again and just, abandon that part of life.
And how did it feel? Well, I haven't seen the videos because you haven't published them yet. But how did it feel when after 2 times 8 months or so, you arrived at the end of this trail in Cyprus?
It was I think what I remember of finishing in Cyprus was where I finished. There was like they'd built like a brick kind of pavement right to the edge of the sea. I don't know if that was for but it must have been for boats years ago or something. So it was like literally the path literally just ended at the sea, and it was like very strange being there. It was quite a popular place for people, sort of quite a few tourists around. So I got to the end, and I literally reached the end of the path, and was like, oh, okay. And yeah, it was a little bit of an anticlimax, because I think really it's about what happens along the way rather than like the destination. So I think 2 days before I reached the end, I think the last town was Napa on Cyprus, which is like a party town. So it was quite surreal to kind of finish basically in Napa. Near the end, there was like a free campsite. So I went and just stayed on this free campsite for, I think, 3 nights or something, and just relaxed and read and just stayed out in nature for a little bit longer, which was nice. It's a very like personal thing to finish a long journey like that, a long walk, I think.
This was the 9th episode of Túranapló, and the final one in the first season. I'd like to thank Ashley for the conversation. Don't forget to follow him on Instagram and YouTube. His username is Ashley G Deannel in both places. We'll be back in the summer. See you then.